This is Jeremy Carlson, and you're listening to the Bluegrass Sports Performance Podcast. Today, we are talking with Coach Andrew Hackney, the strength and conditioning coach at Ballard High School. Coach, how are we doing today?
Hey, doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. So, Coach, before we really get into it, share with our listeners a little bit about your background, where you're from, kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I guess to start off, I grew up outside Atlanta, Gwinnett County, which is a pretty large school district, about 150,000 students. So I think it's like the 9th or 10th largest in the U.S. But in athletics, we're a big part of the success down there with the academics as well. But really growing up, played kind of every sport you could think of, from soccer, basketball, baseball, kind of ran the whole gamut of things. And then I think like most people, when I got to high school, had to start kind of picking some things to focus on. So football was huge in the South, still is. So football was kind of my main sport. And then decided to wrestle in the winter and then do track and field in the spring. So started throwing discus and shot put for my high school team. So I was a offensive tackle, about 6 foot, 6'1". So as I progressed, didn't necessarily have a lot of like big time college offers, but had a lot of success in the throwing events, and ended up getting a scholarship to Louisville. So that brought me up to Kentucky, and then competed there for 4 years in the shot put, discus, hammer throw. And as far as strength conditioning, our high school had in-school weights. So we had all the football players were required to take it. Sophomore, junior, senior year, we ran a like the old school, bigger, stronger, faster, like 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1, almost every week. But the consistency, I think, was what made it effective. We focused on bench, squat, and clean, kind of the big three. And we're actually taught how to do those things. So, and then when I got to college, had an awesome strength coach, Eric Hammer, who runs the Norton Sports Performance here in Louisville. And that's kind of where I probably really understood the other side of strength conditioning, especially in a sport where everything's measured. You can improve two ways, by getting stronger or by improving your technique. So for me, I was able to get stronger each year, improve each year, and stay injury free. So a lot of that was kind of attributed to how he ran his training. And so kind of started to understand like how to taper, not just go in the gym to, one of the things we always say is like, we're not working out, we're training. And so actually doing things with a purpose. So graduated from U of L with a health and PE certification, and always liked lifting and training, and actually started out as a middle school health teacher in Oldham County. And I was kind of like a has-been athlete, I guess. I was like, back in my day kind of thing. And was going to go an administrative route for principalship. Got my admin certificate, and then moved into Jefferson County really to do administration. And so while all this was happening, my wife was teaching at the middle school in Jefferson, at a middle school in Jefferson County. And I met her in college. She runs marathons and was a distance runner at U of L. And kind of got plugged into some people, and they were like, hey, we're wanting to start this strength program over at Ballard. Who are some people that'd be interested? And it was something that probably when I was in college, I would always say that was my dream job, was to do high school strength conditioning, but it just didn't exist up here. And so once I kind of laid my roots in Kentucky, it was a little disappointing to be like, man, there's high schools aren't investing in a full-time strength conditioning coach. So I saw this as an opportunity, and moved over there 5 years ago with a football class. And then this year is my first year. So once I heard they were starting that over at Ballard, it just seemed like it would be a good fit. And then at the same time, we have a principal who, it was his vision to kind of create that program. So anytime you have an administration that's supporting what you're doing, it makes it that much easier. And it's been really just a good fit. And we've done a lot in the weight room. We've invested a lot of funds. We're getting ready to go through a pretty major renovation here. But we still have a lot of the barriers that you have to deal with in some of these larger school districts.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of really interesting points, and I'll kind of want to backtrack, and I'll probably touch on a few of them here. So you were fortunate enough to be in a place outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where you did have a high school strength and conditioning program. So talk to us. I know you talked to us a little bit about the Bigger, Faster, Stronger, but what did that setup look like? How big was your school, and how did that start getting you down this path?
Yeah, so I went to Brookwood High School, which is like a six or 7A school, whatever the largest class is down there, with a very rich football tradition. Opened in the 80s, and I don't think they had their first losing season until like 2015 or something. 3 head coaches in the last 30 years, and would be identified as a football school, definitely. But yeah, so our high school actually had 3 weight rooms. We had about 3,400 students, so a pretty large high school. And we had a field house that was where the football locker rooms were, coaches' offices, and then that was the weight room for advanced weight training, which was pretty selective for just football players. Our school also had offered beginners weight training and a females fitness class, which were 2 other weight rooms in the school that were a little bit smaller, probably a little more comparable to what we have in JCPS, because we haven't done the field house option. But so yeah, down there, it was spread out 6 periods a day, 20 to 30 kids in each class. Our offensive line coach was the weight training teacher, and he had us on just a year-long program. Flat bench, incline bench, a lot of testing, but just, I think the biggest thing and what I'm realizing now is just the consistency of it. We didn't do necessarily a lot of fancy things, but we were in a program where it wasn't just like training 6 weeks leading up to season. So that's a lot of things I'm seeing now, especially with your non-football sports, is they want to go and do like a 6-week training session, start their season, and then they don't touch the weight room again until 6 weeks before their next season. So that's something that I've kind of pushed here is it's like, let's be consistent over the long term. Then we don't have the pressure to, have to do anything crazy, but just be good at being consistent. So.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. And I know we've talked about in other states, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, where there is a buy-in, not just from just one school or one school district, but seems like across the state, it is a fairly well-known thing that most schools have in-school weight training. They have multiple weight rooms. So it's unique for somebody like you that's come from a place like that. And I'm sure it's been eye-opening in many ways. And now transitioning into JCPS where there isn't really anything. Because to my knowledge, is there another strength and conditioning coach like you at the public school system? I know that we've got St. X Trinity, a few things like that, but I don't have a big knowledge base to know that there's a ton going on in Jefferson County. Is that fair to say?
I don't want to say that nothing is happening because I just don't know. Like, I don't want to be ignorant and be like, we're not, we're doing something nobody else is. I mean, I know some of the other schools offer in-school weights. I don't think it's structured in the way that we have. Like this year, it's a sophomore through senior class. I'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, sophomores through seniors, we probably have 95% of the football players. We've got all the basketball players. And then kind of a handful of the other sports. But yeah, I know some other schools in our area and some successful schools, they'll have like 1 period of weights, and it's just kind of a mix. But we've tried to be very intentional. And one thing I've tried to be intentional of, which may be a little different, this is probably more my track background, is kind of taking it out of being like the football weight room and it's the sports weight room. And so we went away from having a 1 class of the entire football team in there, and we've split our football team over 2 periods. So my 6th and 7th period of the day are really heavy. Almost every kid in there is an athlete at some level. And honestly, my goal is probably to try to build like a advanced or an elite class where you kind of have a lot of your top athletes in that last period of the day, just because that's where the kids want to be and they don't have to go back to class all sweaty and that kind of stuff. So it's just, it's different facilities, different, just speaking back to Georgia, like we had locker rooms, we had showers. So, I mean, we're showering after practice, we're showering in between classes. We just don't have those facilities in Jefferson County to make it that accessible for kids.
Well, it's good too to see. So you've got this background coming from Georgia, and I came from the college sector, so it was a little bit different going down to the high school sector. Is we can have the ideal model and we can see, hey, this is where we want to go and this is what we're working towards, but working within the confines of what you have right now, right? And I was fortunate enough to come up to Ballard when you guys hosted Family Day. I guess it's almost been a year now. Yeah. So and you guys have how many people? And this will start getting us into our conversation about Ballard itself. But how many people go to Ballard?
Typically about 2,000. We're at about 2,200 this year.
Yeah, 2,200. And then your weight room right now is about how many square feet?
I don't know the exact square foot off the top of my head, but it's we have in there right now we have 12 racks. So
12 racks. That could get tight quick, especially if you start putting people in there. There's 2,000 kids. I'm only dealing with 770 at my school, and it already starts.
Right. Yeah. So we definitely do things based on our population, obviously. So.
Yeah. There's no question. Okay, so talk to us a little bit about kind of Ballard's setup in itself, because again, I think, and the unique part about all of the conversations I've had with coaches is that every place is different, and that then ends up impacting how we think about programming. There's an ideal way to program, and if we could live in that ideal world, that'd be great, but that's not the case. So talk to us just about Ballard itself, and then we'll start going down the rabbit hole of your strength and conditioning program.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Although right here it says host disabled, attendee from share screen.
Go ahead.
All right, let me try this now. Okay. You see that?
Yeah, I got you.
All right, so like I said, a little bit about Ballard. About 2,000 students typically. We're closer to 2,200 this year. Traditionally has been ranked as one of the higher achieving schools in Jefferson County for sure, but even across the state. That's the one thing that makes it unique is that Jefferson County has a certain aura, I guess, or people hear things about it. And even me teaching out in Oldham County, totally different school district. It's easy to kind of make assumptions about things, but we have some awesome kids at our school, and for the most part, it's an awesome place to work. I mean, I've loved going to school there and stuff, so it's been great. But diversity wise, 55% white, 30% African American, Hispanic, and then free and reduced lunch. And the one thing that's interesting about JCPS is that every kid in the district gets free breakfast and lunch. And so the foods, there is food available. I mean, you could talk about school lunch nutrition. That's a totally different topic that you could go on about, but they do have access for all the kids. So we're on a 7-period day. I have 5 weight training classes, 2 girls and 3 boys classes. And then I do teach a special ed PE class. So this is our first year with 2 girls classes, which has been interesting. And that's really, I guess, changed in terms of like buy-in. This year, our girls have really taken it up to another level. And a lot of it has to do with working with the counselors and being intentional about which kids are signing up for the class. And I think we've kind of laid that foundation of expectations in our class, and dressing out is required, participation is required, we use Team Builder, filling out Team Builder app is required. And so we don't have kids joining the class that are just joining it to try to find an easy class. So our weight room growth, this is just how many kids we run through our program. My classes are typically capped at 50. I've got a period of 60 right now. So just when I first got there in 2018, we had our 2 classes, and it was probably less than 100, but we've gone up to about 250 students being serviced, coming through the weight room 10th through 12th grade. So, but with that being said, I get a sheet in the spring, and we had about 350 students actually sign up for the course. And so that's one of the reasons why we continue to grow it, and add sections is because every year we get more and more kids to sign up. And a lot of that comes through conversations with coaches, explaining to them, showing them what we're doing in the weight room. And then they basically are communicating to their kids like, hey, we want y'all to be in there. That was huge for basketball. It's been huge for baseball. Soccer has had a big push this year, getting those kids in there.
So before we get going a little bit further and talk to us about that a little bit more, because I think this is a big point that when people get into the high school realm, they don't realize the collaboration that needs to happen for this to work, right? Coaches are one part of it, and you already mentioned, and I'd like you to maybe expand upon it a little bit more if you can, but the relationships that you've built with maybe the school counselors, the administration, because those are huge components to be able to get your class going in the right direction. They've got to be on board and see the same vision that you do.
Right. I think it obviously starts with administration, with our principal, talking to him and having conversations with him about how we are tracking data, how we're looking at data, explaining the system that we're using to him. One of the things that we're going to get into in the next couple of years with our renovation is bring in some of the velocity monitors, and we've talked about collaborating with other teachers, some people in our STEM department to do action research projects where they'll have kids actually come in and analyze bar path, velocity, and those types of things, and try to give feedback to the athletes lifting. So just things like that add probably validity to your class, and it's an easier selling point, I think. So anytime you can collaborate with other teachers and not just be like, hey, we're just in here lifting weights and we're just doing it for the football team. So doing it across the board. And then in terms of like counselors, understanding that, and it's really with everybody, but just having that open mindset of like, they're not going to do everything that you want, but if you can get 80%, that's going to go a long way. I can't give them a list of all the kids that I want and be like, these are the kids that are going to be in my class. And if they're not, then I'm going to throw a hissy fit about it. But they're going to be way more open to helping you if you kind of understand that sometimes, your numbers might be high, or sometimes it may not be exactly what you want. And that's kind of the route that I've taken with it. And we've had a pretty good turnout with things. And like I said, it just helps when you have people in those positions that understand the importance of your class. One of our counselors has a son that played high school baseball, and she's like, oh, I understand why it's important to have these kids in the weight room and not just anyone who signs up and those types of things. So and then as far as coaches, I think a lot of it's word of mouth. Social media is huge, and that's one of the reasons I tell the kids I like putting things out on social media for your coaches to see, for college coaches to see, and really just for their peers, because these kids do work hard, and there's a lot of things that they do that go unnoticed. And the more exposure that you can give them, I think the more buy-in that you get. And then, like I said, having those conversations with coaches. One of the things that I love, I think it was Mark Hoover. I think he's the guy out of South Carolina. He's got like his 5 pillars. I steal stuff from everybody. So, I think that's what we talked about before coming on here, is just kind of picking up from other coaches. But you could touch on our program and I could tell you just kind of pulling stuff from everybody. But like his first pillar was like, do no harm. And so when you approach the coaches and you're like, hey, my first thing is like, we're not going to harm your kids. Like, we're not going to put them in a position that's unsafe. And I even have to tell the kids that sometimes, if it's an exercise they want to go heavy on, or they want to, add weight, I'm like, I'm not training you to try to be a power lifter. We're trying to improve your sport. So I'm not necessarily worried about you hitting this number on a back squat or you hitting this number on a bench press if it's going to put you at a greater risk. Like, we can accomplish that same goal with other exercises. So, I think just kind of being open-minded about those types of things, and being transparent with those coaches and administrators, like, they can understand that and respect that. And then it's just kind of you kind of get the ball rolling downhill there. And then obviously for things like football's our cornerstone sport pretty much, because it's the largest group of kids. It's just sharing with them what we do, why we do it, and then with our football coaches, it's showing progress. and giving them the data and just being like, hey, look, this kid has done this, or, sending a text message during class, hey, you check this out. Your linebacker just did this. So, because it takes a huge portion of time off of their plate, which I know they appreciate.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of those things that we, as strength and conditioning coaches, can continue to add to their team, right? I think a lot of the times, especially in smaller county schools, they want to put the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and if they're qualified, it's absolutely great, good for them to be able to do it. But I think it does take a lot off of those coaches to be able to free themselves up to be able to do football, which is what they truly love, just like we truly love to be in the weight room and working with their kids.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so sorry, I know I took us off.
No, you're fine. I was so I think what I have here. Okay, so this is at least with the slides I'm sharing, these are some pictures of our weight room, and just some of the changes that we've made. I think when we had, I don't know if we had this wall up last year with the family day.
Yeah, last year there was a wall there, so that's you guys.
Yeah, so we still had a wall up. We had some low-hanging bird cage lights that have been replaced. We finally got some speakers up, and we have some of the screens that are mounted up to the walls. So in the past, well, I'll jump into programming a little bit. That's be a little too quick to do, but yeah. So we have six half racks on one side of the weight room, and then looking at the other side, we have another 6 half racks. Another image. We've added, things like plyo boxes, and a lot of the weights and dumbbells and med balls have been new this year. And then we use Team Builder. Team Builder has been huge for us, especially with the large numbers. Kind of flip through these, but yeah. So I mean, it's a decent amount of space, but when you get 60 kids in there, you can't necessarily have everybody in a rack at the same time. We don't necessarily have the space or equipment to do that. In terms of like, we inherited, we had 12 racks with 12 benches, but like 4 of them weren't even safe for kids to use. So that's when I kind of like, scrapped them together and found 6 quality benches for us to use. And then same thing kind of with bars. And that's looking across both sides.
Yeah, that's awesome that you guys were able to get that, again, that wall down to be able to, again, you would think a wall doesn't do much, but just to open up that space a little bit. I haven't seen it in a year now, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and we've had a lot of other challenges kind of Jefferson County wise, like half of our weight room, the one side was an actual room at some point. And then I think some previous coaches came in and they busted down half a wall and laid some concrete, and just things as little as just like getting good airflow down there. I mean, you'd be surprised. We've got an old building. I think Ballard we just celebrated our 50th year a couple years ago. So trying to put a weight room in a room that wasn't necessarily designed to be one has definitely had some obstacles.
I can imagine. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Again, great to see the development and continued progress. And again, a lot of that comes from you, but also comes from the administration being able to help you guys out, which is great. So as we look at this weight room, and just help our listeners kind of understand it a little bit. So when you guys get your kids to come in, do they have locker rooms to be able to change into? Then they come over to you all in the weight room. How far or close are those? All those types of things.
So we have locker rooms in 2 different locations. Outside of this room, there's a hallway, and there's the football locker rooms that are down there. And then down the hallway and upstairs, there's another hallway, and that's where there's like 4 other locker rooms. So yeah, typically that's the one nice thing about having a lot of the football players towards the end of the day. They have those locker rooms that are accessible. But basically when the bell rings, I meet most of the kids up in the hallway, and I'll open up whatever locker room we're using for that class period, allow the kids to change, and then they're going down to the weight room. And then through Team Builder on one of the screens, that's one of the touch panels, they have an attendant sign in, so they just tap their name and it checks them in for the day. And then on the other screen, that's the workout of the day. And at this point, they know what they're doing each day because we're still doing the same workout we started the school year with pretty much. But a lot of our kids will go ahead and get into some type of warm up, some type of movement. But you know how high school kids are. It's like herding cats sometimes. So it's once we get them all in there, we'll start a warm up together. So we just do. You can kind of see we kind of have some paths across the weight room. We get into 5-6 lines, and we just go through forward jog. They jog and walk back, high knees, and then we do elbow to insteps. And then if we're squatting that day, we spread out and do some hip mobility. And if we're benching that day, we step out and do some shoulder mobility. So it takes about maybe 3 minutes, and then we split up and get into our workout.
Nice, that's awesome. So you guys, if I remember correctly, you said you had 7 periods. So how long is each period for you all then?
So we have 50-minute classes.
Okay,
Yeah.
So if we're coming from a class, we've got to get to the locker room, change. We got to imagine part of that's going to bleed over into class. So, and then we got to warm up. So we're looking at roughly, sorry, I may be jumping ahead on you a little bit.
No, you're fine.
What are we looking at roughly time-wise from there we go. So you got it all down. This is how you know you're talking to strength and conditioning coaches, because they've already got it all down.
Well, I'll back up first. This is my saving grace right here. This is one of the first purchases I made for our weight room. And there's a bunch of different times. The only reason I ended up buying this one is I just remember being in college, and we had the timing system, and it was with a remote, and we spent like half a workout because the strength coach was trying to figure out how to program the clock the right time. Yeah. And then the other time it was like no one could find the remote or the batteries were dead. So Gym Next, I've had it for 3 or 4 years now. It is awesome. You can buy it on Amazon, buy it from their website. But there's no remote. It's an app. So it connects through your phone. And then these are just some screenshots. You can actually build your workout through your phone. You can have different timers. So we run on a timing system, the same timing system, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday we finish with what we just call Flex Friday, which is a bunch of bicep curls. But so all of our working sets are a little bit shorter. So instead of 3:30, I think they're 3 minutes. But once that starts, this is kind of what our class looks like. Obviously, it changes a little bit, but I give, 5 minutes locker room and then attendance announcements, and we go through our warm up. And then the first 2 minutes of us starting after finishing our warm up, that's where kids are getting their warm up sets in. They're checking Team Builder to see what their history was, to see what weights they need to get out to get ready to get started. And then we go by a set interval. So we do 4 sets on all of our lifts, and then we rotate. We run 2 blocks, an A block and a B block. And so the kids that start on A block will rotate to B block and vice versa.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's kind of
that's great. And I think that's, again, as I've had an opportunity to talk to more coaches, again, coming from the college sector, I remember it was like, we got 45 minutes, just 3 days a week, and it's going to be the weight room just to ourselves. You start getting into the high school realm, you're like, holy crap, I'm, again, herding cats. And then I've also got to figure out how to just condense this down, warm up, all that type of stuff. I'm not just lifting for 45 minutes or just doing speed and agility for 45 minutes. I am trying to condense this and then get them out to the locker room, shower, and get them out. So it's great to see a lot of the similarities between that. So again, sorry, I know I'm taking us off track a little bit, but that's awesome. Team Builder, I think, is one of the things that you mentioned in there that I think would be important maybe for some of our listeners who haven't used it before. Just to kind of have them kind of give the brief overview of how you use it. Again, it's a tool, and I think it can be, if used well, it can be really a powerful tool, almost as a kind of a second coach, helping collect weights. But tell us how you use it and how it's been beneficial for you.
Yeah. So the one thing I will say of Team Builder, if I was in a situation where I had 15 to 20 kids in a class, I don't know if I would necessarily use it. It's definitely something that helps with larger numbers, where I'd have 50 to 60 kids, because if you imagine just trying to print cards and stay organized with all that stuff, I've done it. We've done color coding, we've done all those things. It's just been a huge time saver. But yeah, I use Team Builder for attendance. Like I said, the kids, they'll check in on the screen for them to get their workout. Suggested weight is huge. So we go off of what can you do this amount of weight? And then the next week, you need to be at where you're at last week. And if it's easy, you go up 5 pounds on each side. That's kind of how we stack the days. I do put percentages in there off of like a relative intensity chart, but I just do it for the first set, and it's just a suggested weight. So some of our kids don't necessarily know, like, what should I be doing for 4 reps? Well, if we're at 80%, it's going to track their max for them and give them at least a rough estimate. So sometimes that's off. Sometimes it's normally it's a pretty good number, and they're at least there for their first set. Data tracking is huge. And then the accountability and ownership. So a third of our grade comes from the kids just putting weight in Team Builder. So they're required to input their weights. And then I run a completion report. And that's a third of their grade, whether or not they have to hit like a 75% threshold on entering all their lifts. And then they, just the things like leaderboards, the TV, they have a thing called TV mode where they share PRs, but running leaderboards is just another thing you can put out on social media or share with the kids, especially when they're across different classes. They want to know, a kid jumps 35 on the jump mat. It's like, is that the highest in the school? And they're like, no, this kid did this. Oh, I know him. So it starts conversations. And so, yeah, it's another tool. It doesn't replace anything. I think, I've always believed, technology is a tool that enhances learning, whether you're in the weight room or whether you're in the math classroom, whatever. It doesn't replace what you're doing. So we try to look at it from that standpoint. And then, this will be our second year with Team Builder. So yeah, it's been really cool.
That's cool. Talk to me a little bit about this too, because this is something, again, adjustment on my end is I never had to do grades before. Now I have to do grades as a high school strength and conditioning coach, right? And that's a weird thing to try to grade. It's something that's It's not turning in an assignment. So you said third of their grade is going to be that they've got to complete 75% or input 75% of their work.
Right.
Team Builder. And I've used Team Builder before. Kudos to you for doing the 75%, because I remember looking at it and going, they should be able to enter 100% of their time. Sometimes Team Builder doesn't save. Sometimes things. So talk to us, why the 75% maybe threshold, and then what are the other thirds of their grades that they get there?
Right. So in the past, I've kind of done the same thing. I've been like, all right, well, if you're 80 to 100, you get a 90. If you're 60 to 80, you get an 80. So I basically have it tiered where they're 75% or above. They get 100 for that grade. And then 50 to 75%, they get an 80, and then below that's a 50%. It's just a U pretty much, but it doesn't necessarily completely tank them. But it's just after the first 2 weeks, and I think that was the problem I had last year, was we kind of started Team Builder in September, October, and I wasn't, I didn't explain the expectations as well, and we didn't necessarily have that. But yeah, after these kids start getting 50s and things on their grades, they're like, oh, I actually have to fill this thing out. And some kids are gonna bluff on that stuff, and they're not gonna put in the right weight, or they're just gonna put in the suggested weight, and those things happen. But the ones that do it and follow it, I mean, it's a great tool for them. So yeah, that's a third of their grade. And then the other part is just participation. So Jefferson County, we have to have 2 tiers to our grade book. They call it progressing and mastery. So the other one is participating. So I put grades in every 2 weeks. That's 10 calendar days. So it's 100 points. So if you don't lift on a day, or you opt out, or you just say you don't feel like it, I tell the kids, I'm like, that's fine. It's 10 points a day. So if you're fine with, use this as your off day and not lift, just know that, your participation grade will be a 90 for this 2-week block. So, and it's nice for me because I'm not every weekend pulling Team Builder reports and those types of things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's one of those things. I think it's important that the high school strength and conditioning coach realize whatever you give grades to is what the kids are going to find important. Right. And I just made a change. I give kids 3 points a day. One is for dressing out. The other is for their attitude and effort, and the other is being on time. And I was finding at the end of the workout, I was getting frustrated because they weren't cleaning up the rack. I didn't make it a clear expectation to them that is important and needs to be done. So we've added a 4th point this week, and man, I'll tell you what, the weight room, spotless. They are ready to freaking go at the end of it.
We had that with tardies. It was like, if you're tardy, the 5 points is the most you can get for that day. So you're 5 points off for the week, 5 points off for the block, and that it fixed most of the problems. Like we necessarily don't have issues with that. So
That's awesome. Awesome. So, okay. So now we've got the format of how you're going to program. What is kind of a 1,000-foot overview when you start looking at your days? What does that start looking like for you as we go along here?
Yeah. So I guess I'll explain how I got to this point. So the first thing I did when I came over to Ballard was I was like, who knows this stuff and who's done a good job of it? And so basically went down a rabbit hole and ended up shooting off an email to Kevin Vanderbush up at Ben Davis, and went up and shadowed him, which I know a ton of people have, and basically ran his system at Ballard, which I don't know if you're familiar with how he does his thing. He has an upper body day and a lower body day, and he runs 5 stations for 7 minutes, and it's 5 upper body stations, and the next day is 5 lower body stations. So and he has the timer, and it's like 7 minutes, and then rotate 7 minutes and rotate 7 minutes and rotate. So I tried that. We had pretty good success with it, but the issue that I ran into was things like the bench press and the squat. The kids were only having 7 minutes to do those exercises, and I felt like we just really weren't valuing those the way that I thought that we should be valuing them, and definitely weren't tracking them the way that I want to be tracking them, because we had them filling out paper cards and doing those types of things, and there were a lot of challenges involved there. So the other thing is he has a huge facility, a huge weight room for kids to spread out. And a lot of times he had some assistant coaches in there kind of helping out, which is huge just for the accountability, from the accountability standpoint. So I kind of transitioned to try to find a way to get kids in the racks longer. And so that's where we went to like the A block and the B block. So now 4 sets of 3.5 minutes. They're at 14 minutes plus a 2-minute warm up. So they have 16 minutes to squat on Monday, 16 minutes to bench on Tuesday to do some type of deadlift or clean on Thursday. But the other thing that we've done this year, and I've gotten away from split programming, I've been pretty happy with it, is just kind of looking at like the Joe Kin tier method. And I think Toronzo does that over at St. X too. We run a very watered down version of that, I would say. But Monday's our leg day. We do lower, upper, total. So whatever the main primary lift is, that's going to be our A block. And then we'll do accessory work on the other 2 with our B block. So Monday, we switched to Monday squats this year, just because I noticed that most of our kids were pretty refreshed and felt good on Monday because they'd actually gotten sleep over the weekend. And Tuesday was like my hardest day, and that's when we needed a squat, and kids were tired and they'd stayed up late, and kind of back to the reality of school. So we switched and we went to lower body Monday, and then Tuesday is kind of our big bench day. So we're doing an upper body there, and then we'll do some accessory work for total and lower. So we will do like hex bar jumps, and then either like some hamstring work or some band work for lower body. Wednesday, we call fill the gaps. And so this is basically anytime early in the year, it's a lot of safety things, but it's basically anything I feel like I need to teach to the entire class, but I don't want to take time during the workout. And that's something that I noticed was happening. There were things I wanted to talk to the kids about, but I'm like, I really don't want to, take away from our work time today. So we've been intentional about, hey, Wednesday is going to be our time where, we'll spend 15, 20 minutes on clean technique. We'll spend 15, 20 minutes on, a lot of people aren't dumbbell incline benching the right way. So these are the things we need to make sure we're doing. We spend a whole day on, bench press grip and where your forearms should be and things like that. And then typically, or we'll do like yoga on those days, which the kids did not like right away. And now they're like begging for yoga. They're like, we love this. So it's been finding the right yoga video, if you're going to do it with your kids, is definitely huge. A lot of like hip movement and those types of things, at least with our kids, that's a deficiency. And then it's a data day. So about once a month, I'll put out a Google sheet where they have to go into their team builder, and they actually have to, like analyze their trend lines and I ask them things like, is your bench press improving, declining, or staying the same? what does this tell you? So that gives them some accountability. So now they're going back on their team builder and they're like, oh, it's actually important what I put in. So that's kind of been our Wednesday. And then Thursday is our total lower upper day. So we power clean. I know there's a lot of stuff with social media. People are kind of divided on that. I like power cleans. I feel like I can teach them well. I still do those. Went through the USA weightlifting certification with cleans, planning on doing some masters competitions in the next year or two. And a lot of our kids like it. So a lot of people will talk about the injury and risk of injury. And, I've had more injuries on like hex bar deadlift where kids will load up the weight without me seeing and like put too much weight on and do something stupid. So Thursday is our clean day. I like it as a good primer also for our football players, because we're not necessarily doing anything too heavy, but really kind of, getting the nervous system, those types of things ready. And then Friday is kind of our secondary lift. So we'll do like a lot of single leg squats. We'll do our incline bench press, things like that. Our football players in season right now, they'll go through like a dumbbell bench and some pull-ups, and then they don't do the single leg squats. They've got some mobility work that they do. And then we finish with everybody basically grabs a band and we get a nice little pump and 5 sets of 20 on bicep curls, and kids walking the hallways flexing. So it's a good way for us to end the Fridays. But that's pretty much what our program looks like in terms of reps. Let's see if I put this in here. Okay. So yeah, our main movements that we track, squat, bench press, and clean, and then vertical jump. So we do vertical jumps every Thursday in between their power cleans. They'll have a set of power cleans and a vertical jump on the jump mat to get, and they have to record that. And then those are just some of the accessory movements we do. I'm a big pull-up guy. I like doing the pull-ups. I think the girls, it's been really cool to see them like set those goals of like trying to do a pull-up. With our guys, we do a lot of weighted pull-ups. We traditionally don't go over like 5 or 6 reps. We just finished some eccentric pull-ups here at the beginning of weeks. And then we'll box jump, single leg squat, band walks, hamstring curl, band push downs, planks, med ball slams. And we pretty much, everything you're seeing on the screen here is about what we get in throughout the week. One of the reasons I like the tier program is when I ran the split level program, the issue that I had was, if you had a kid that missed your Monday and that was your squat day. Well, if you're not doing any, leg work again until Thursday, I mean, they're missing, optimal training time. Where if we're touching the legs a little bit and they miss the day before, their legs might feel better. They might go heavier, things like that. So I've been pretty happy with it. Plus, a lot of times if it's like, hey, it's leg day, you can just tell like the presence in the room's a little different, because now they're like, oh, it's leg day. Or if a kid's hurt, they're like, I can't do anything. I got a hurt knee. It's like, well, we still have these upper body movements that you can do. So the kids have been receptive to it. And I think as long as things are spread out the right way, and they have enough rest. I mean, we're not doing like back-to-back presses on things.
Well, and it's good to see too when you look through what you have on there, and also your kind of weekly general overview is there's a little give and take, right? Like that you're thinking about Flex Friday, for example, is a great one. I do the same thing. We have a similar thing on a Thursday where we do that, and we allow the kids, because they really like bicep curls.
Yeah.
Especially our males, they just love them. It makes you I was talking to Coach Ferranz over at St. X. He said, I didn't put bicep curls in for the first year that I was here. I put bicep curls in the second year, and I became the greatest strength and conditioning coach alive. And you're like, well, if that's what it takes to create a little buy-in, it's great, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
That's kind of where I was with like box jumps. Box jumps was another one. I was kind of like, 24-inch box. It's like we're gonna do it this way and this way. And now it's like, what am I trying to really accomplish? I'm trying to get you to jump. And so, we're doing them consistent, and we've got the nice big soft shell boxes. It's like, the kids want to put a little bit more on there, and they're challenging themselves, and they're actually trying to to put forth the effort. I mean, obviously in a safe manner. We have certain expectations like landing on the box with your entire foot and, being able to stick the landing and stuff. But, there's definitely give and take. So.
Yeah, and also it's something I haven't ever considered. If we back up one screen here, if you're watching this, is what I enjoyed learning is I get in this same scenario where I've got 4 days where I'm like, we need to work really hard for 4 days. But then on the 5th day, it's almost like, okay, what do we do with them? Right. To train them 5 days a week really hard, especially if they're playing sports after school, playing on club teams. Woo, yeah, it's a lot. They just come in dead. But I love what you've got here with the fill in the gaps and the ability to either talk about technique work, do something with a jump mat, go back and have them. I think the idea of analyzing where their numbers are is a great idea. It's something with Team Builder that you can definitely do. I'm now sitting here going, okay, I track everything through Google Sheets. How could I potentially do that? Because I think that's a great idea. Because then they have to start thinking about, okay, what am I doing on a day-to-day basis that's helping out those numbers?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and then it puts it back. Yeah, it puts it back on them. So I mean, just with my numbers and with the number of kids, I've tried to do everything individualized, and I just said, you know what, I'm gonna move to Team Builder. And once I did, I'm like, all right, I can still do these things, and it made it nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing really on programming is we run, and these can change just based on the calendar, but we traditionally run 9-week cycles. I did the 2 weeks at 10, 2 weeks at 8, two weeks at 6 is, and then I think it's like 5-3-1 is what Vanderbush did at Ben Davis. And 10s is a lot, especially for football players, like in season, like asking them to like back squat 10 reps. For me personally, I think it is. I know like for my training, like 4 reps is cardio. Mm-hmm. So we do 3 weeks at 8s, and I think it allows us enough time for them to actually figure out like what they can do comfortably 8 times, but then also have time to improve instead of jumping to the next rep range too quick. And then 3 weeks at 6s and 3 weeks at 3s. And then we might test depending on how the calendar looks. We might just reset at 8s. I know with my football players, I'm planning on just keeping them at 3s until the season's over. I'm not going to have them reset back to 8. And then all of our Olympic lifts, like anytime we power clean, is just half the reps. So, I mean, we'll be 4s, 3s, and 2s pretty much is like our clean progression. So we're not going to make kids do 3 sets 8 on power cleans.
So speaking of, that would not be a good thing. But speaking of that, how do you differentiate your program? Because again, if you're working with 60 kids, right? You said you might have a class of 60. How do you differentiate programming for those kids? Is there, I've talked to some coaches that use a stoplight system where, it's game day, you're not doing much, to one day out, you're doing something. But then you also could have a football player and a baseball player standing next to each other who are completely opposite seasons. So talk to us a little bit how that might fit into this general overview.
So for our football players, they follow the workout, the program, and then they have a different Friday lift. And I'll just verbally tell them that. I have updated on Team Builder, but we're kind of at the point now where I'm just like, you're going to do the A block and then cut the B block out. With all of our other athletes like soccer, who's in season right now, golf, they go off field hockey, they're going off the stoplight system for the most part. So we've got that posted in the weight room. Volleyball, same thing. And we kind of tier it from there and just try to be smart about it. So, and then in terms of programming, all of our kids are on the same program. I tell them their experience in this class is their foundation, and we talk about, the foundation being the most important, part of a structure, and strength conditioning is a lifelong sport. It's a lifelong activity. I'm 35 and I'm having more fun lifting weights than I probably ever have. And I'm glad I had coaches in the past that taught me how to do things safely, and at the same time not have to deal with major injuries. And so, I think there's a foundation level of strength that it doesn't really matter so much what sport you're dealing with, because I deal basically 100% with the strength aspect of it. We don't have the time or the resources to get into much of the conditioning aspect, and a lot of their conditioning is done at practice. So, I say their conditioning for their sport, playing the sport, or at practice, and then people are doing things in the private sector and those types of things. It's like, that's where if you want to do some more sports specific stuff, you can really accomplish those things. I mean, we're not doing like golf ball specific or golfing specific med ball throws. We're just doing med ball slams because with our population, that's going to be the easiest way to kind of do it consistently.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always try to think about it in terms of a kid, and when you've got, and I know that you've got younger kids, when they're younger, they don't need a whole big change in a sports specific program. Just like a kid when they're first learning how to walk, they just need to learn how to walk first. That's
right.
Steps, and they're just, most of these kids, I'm sure it's in for you as well, but I know for kids at Mercer that I work with, usually freshman year, maybe 8th grade if we're lucky enough to see them because they play on the football team and we can get them in a little bit earlier. That's what they're going to do. They're learning the first couple of years of just how to walk, crawl, walk, do all of those things. And just general strength training can be really advantageous for a lot of them. So, what anything else that you would like to share, show us? This has been great so far. I really do appreciate you opening on us to see.
Just some other kind of, I guess, beliefs. So our first cycle, we front squat. So all of our kids want to back squat right now. They're like, which I'm like, awesome, you're begging to back squat. Mm-hmm. We front squat the first 9 weeks of the school year. I think it helps us reinforce teaching the clean, but it immediately removes, and it's one of the reasons I don't like deadlifting, especially first semester too, is it takes a lot of the ego out of the weight room. Because kids aren't walking around bragging about how much they are now, but how much they can front squat. But it's technique driven. It's safe. If you fail, you just dump the weight. And our transition to back squatting has been so much better because if a kid learns how to front squat, you put a bar on their back and you don't really have to teach them too much about a back squat. Where if you do it the other way, they're just frustrated and they're like, I want to put more weight on the bar. We had a lot of issues with our football players having low back injuries and low back tightness when we were back squatting in season. So really that's what drove it. I was like, look, we'll just front squat in the season and we'll still get your legs going, double leg front squat. And we haven't had any kids come to me this year. It's like, oh, my back's killing me. So, and then we'll start back squatting second cycle. And then our biggest max is before spring break, just because with the demographics of my athletes, it's the biggest off season for a lot of them. And it's our most consistent training block. So when we get back from Christmas and it's like January 2nd, we basically get 8 to 12 weeks of uninterrupted training. And so that's when we'll bring things in. Like I'll just introduce into things like bands and like some overload training and some board presses and things like that. Because most of them, we now know how to proficiently back squat and front squat. And now we're really looking at numbers. Basketball is really the only sport that misses that just because they're in season. But most of the athletes I have are fall and spring sports. And then it's a good tune up for, softball and baseball and those kids right before their season starts. And then after spring break, it's just a hodgepodge of testing days and out of the weight room and in the weight room and, all types of crazy things. So, you definitely have to do your programming around the school calendar, and I'll tell our football players it's like now that the kids I had last year, when they're looking at data, they're like, oh, my bench was higher, in the summer. And it's like, well, you're in season right now. So look at where your bench was last year at this time. And in Team Builder, they can look back and go, oh, well, I'm 40 pounds above that. So, and then I'm like, look at what you were at spring break. I had 40 pounds. So that's a good goal for you to set this year. So, we definitely structured around the school calendar, and that's just another barrier that you have to deal with in the high school.
There's no question about that. And I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's something that is oftentimes overlooked is you do have to consider those factors. Again, not just what your setup is, but also what your setup in terms of the physical space, but also what you're having to deal with with your calendar of the academic day and the academic calendar. It's really important to see what that looks like. Anything else that you would like to share with us? As I know we're pushing up on an hour here, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I really do appreciate you kind of opening up and showing us what you've got here.
I mean, no, not too much. I don't think at this point. I mean, like I said, if you have large numbers, I'd encourage people to go look into Team Builder. Team Builder's has been awesome for me in terms of just tracking and those types of things. And then really one of the other things we didn't really talk about was just is your ability to change things on the fly.
Yeah.
So it's you'll set up the weight room and you'll print out all these cards and then you're like, crap, I don't want to do single leg dumbbell RDL because I'm now realizing no one knows how to do it. So in Team Builder, you just open it up and switch it and it's good. So do
you use phones for your kids? Do they just bring their own phone? They download it on there and then they
yeah. So they bring their phones. This is where, let's see, in our administration, this is where we're headed next year with that facility.
Oh, awesome.
So we'll have racks coming in, double-sided half racks, and then let me scroll down. It's probably better to do the overview. So yeah, this is what we're looking at down the road. It's been approved and everything, and we're working on getting these racks finalized, but hopefully by this summer we'll have a weight room that looks similar to that. So we'll have iPads in all the racks. We have the iPads, and I'll let the kids use them. Most of them use their phones, but the iPads seem to work a little bit better. But yeah, the majority of the kids input things on their phones, but ideally we'll have an iPad on every rack. So we'll have 10 iPads and use they have weight room view on Team Builder. You can have 4 kids' accounts pulled up at one time pretty easily. And so that's 40 kids that would have their information up on iPads.
That's great. And so now that's the same physical setup that we saw in those other pictures, right, that you've already shared.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, this is the same physical setup. So instead of racks going this way and I guess over here in this corner, yeah, it's the same setup. So it'll allow us to do the same thing with the A and the B block. But it's better for me. It'll be better viewpoints and lines and things like that in terms of being able to see all the kids at one time. So
well, that's great. And again, as much as we want to push it from as strength and conditioning coaches to get to that point in every weight room, that's great that the administration has bought in to be able to help get you to that point. I mean, because we can only raise so much money as a strength and conditioning department, but that's
right
that they're backing you on.
Yeah, our principal, it's been nice.
That's awesome. All right, well, that's kind of where all my questions were from. As we kind of wrap this up, tell listeners where they can either reach out to you or follow the work that you're doing at Ballard.
So the easiest way is probably is just through Twitter. So my Twitter is @ahackney57. So HACKNEY 57, ahackney57, and my email is too long to list. But yeah, Twitter's probably the easiest way to reach me or follow our program and check out those things. So
that's awesome. Well, Coach, again, thank you so much for carving out an hour of your day, and being able to sit down with us and do that.
No problem.